People who sleep naked. When has it backfired? Story 1. When I was in university, my room was right in front of the university, so when looking out my windows, you would look straight into classrooms. So one day, the inevitable happened. I'd forgotten to close the curtains at night so you couldn't see me while I was in bed due to the head of the bed obstructing the window. However, getting out of bed would expose my entire naked body to the world, so any bored student whose sight was wandering off outside the classroom window could get a nice viewing of my naked body. I fixed it by simply rolling up in my bedsheets and sort of hoping my curtains weren't in my bedsheet roll. Story 2. I was young, like 12, and I just hit puberty. I had slept naked my whole life, and it didn't change the fact that a super hot babysitter that I didn't know was going to work and tried waking me up, which was hard because I was a really heavy sleeper. I woke up as she pulled the covers off to behold my 12-year-old rock-hard morning. Story 3. The suicidal girl that's staying the night at your brother's house because they're watching her for suicide reasons wakes you up in the middle of the night and is sitting right on top of you, telling you that you have to talk her down right then and there or she's going to kill herself in front of you. Yeah, you would probably just rather be closed for that encounter. Story 4. I locked myself out of my flat while sleepwalking. My girlfriend was on holiday, so I had to wait until morning, borrow a towel from a neighbor, and then walked a mile up the road to the estate agent to get a spare key. Story 5. I've been sleeping in the raw since I was a kid and would fidget out of my PJs. I think it used to bug my mother, but she finally gave up. Every girlfriend would start out the relationship by joining me, but over time would end up with the conventional night clothes. It hasn't backfired on me yet. Story 6. I normally don't do this, but once during the summer I had a meal at my favorite local Mexican restaurant. Since I was busy that day, I didn't have lunch and decided to get significantly more than what I normally order to cure the hangry. I also did not get an opportunity to poop that day since it was unusually hot that night. I decided to ditch everything and sleep, but after one realistic dream of me on the toilet, let's just say I had to get a new set of bed sheets the next morning. Story 7. I started somewhere in high school because of night sweats. In college, I moved into an on-campus apartment alone, and the very next morning, I woke up to 3 grown mid-50s dudes with their faces in my window. My bed was directly below the window. University housing gave some BS excuse about my window needing maintenance, just my window specifically, none of the others in the entire complex. The window wasn't even designed to open. I think they were just being pigs, but I was 1,000 miles away from anyone who cared about me and just let it go. Story 8. I was spending the night at my friend's house in a suburban neighborhood in the middle of the night. His mom had let their toy fox terrier out and it got snatched by a coyote. She screamed and woke us all up. A wolf got Noodle within 10 seconds. His dad was sprinting out of the house and completely butt-ass naked with a Glock in his hand and went running down the street. He came back about 15 minutes later with the dog and obviously still completely naked. Story 9. A few years ago, I was working a night shift and had just returned home at 7 a.m. I was so tired that I didn't close the front door properly. I activated the house alarm and I went to my room and undressed myself. After I went to bed, I wake up to the alarm blaring and I look around my room as I hear yelling. I see there are 2 female cops in the house and their guns out and one of them was pointing it at me. I'm half asleep and not really understanding what was going on. The officer asked if I lived here, to which I said yes. Then she ordered me to show her my ID. My ID, which was in my wallet on the dresser. I pointed her to where my wallet was. She ordered me to show it to her, and I said I couldn't get up because I was naked under my blanket. So while still pointing her gun at me, she opened up my wallet. After that, the cops left, and after securing the front door properly, I went back to sleep. Story 10. When my little cousin, who is a male, pulled my blankets off to wake me up, he was not expecting his oldest female cousin to be completely nude. That was a very awkward moment. Story 11. I had a closet-sized single dorm room, and people would always pull the fire alarm in the middle of the night, and we'd all have to go outside. One time, I was so drowsy I just walked out instinctively, and halfway down the hall, I raced back. Thankfully, this was an old building, so I didn't get locked out of the room. My buddy's apartment burned down a few years ago. It was already engulfed by the time he woke up. He ended up running out of it in his t-shirt, which is still pretty purple. Story 12. I was at a house fire once during the night, and the homeowner slept naked when we arrived. He was running around his front yard naked with a garden hose. Thankfully, he was not injured, and we were able to salvage most of his belongings. The one thing he said is that he learned to now sleep with shorts on. My dad always sleeps in the nude. One day, the neighbor's house across the street caught fire after the gas-powered water heater exploded. He could hear the homeowner screaming for help all the way from inside her house. So, still naked, he ran into the burning house and carried her out. Firefighters said if he'd been wearing clothes, the heat from inside the burning building would have ignited them and he would have possibly have burned to death. Story 13. I've always slept naked, but the heater in my room was broken and it was getting too cold even with the layers of blankets. I woke up that morning and knew I had the house to myself, at least until late afternoon, so I continued snoozing in my sister's room with the heater on. The next thing I knew, I heard voices coming up the stairs. There was my sister and her friends. I guess they decided to ditch school and thought I wasn't home. I had no other choice but to roll over and hide under the bed. They were hanging out in that room for a good 2 hours. I was completely naked the whole time. That was almost 15 years ago and she still has no idea. Story 14. I was in middle school and had been sleeping naked under the covers for years while my parents would come in and wake me up. Somehow my body always managed to stay under the blanket by the time morning rolled around. So I was never worried about someone coming in the morning only to see my bare self exposed. Well, one Saturday I was sleeping in and there was some event that my parents wanted to go to along with my older sister and me. They asked her to go in and wake me so I could get ready. My several years long streak of successfully being hidden by the blanket ended that day as my bare ass was exposed to the door of my bedroom. I just remember thinking, I can't believe that after all the time of people coming into my room and waking me up with me being under the blanket, the one time I wasn't fully under one was the time my sister came in. Story 15. I was in a mental hospital and my roommates and I were pretty close, so I was fine sleeping in my underwear. Sleeping there sucked, so I did anything to get a little more comfortable. Anyways, you get 15-minute checks there. Even through the night, I guess I wasn't ready when they shined the flashlight in and I covered up quickly. I got in trouble and was put on boundary precautions. There was a red dot by my name on the whiteboard, so everyone knew from then on I had to sit one couch square away from my peers, and I was carefully monitored for the rest of my stay. I didn't want to get too close to my peers. Story 16. There have been 2 times. Things kind of went sideways once when my daughter's heart respiratory monitor alarm went off in the middle of the night. I jumped out of my bed and performed CPR. Turns out, I just forgot to plug the machine in and the slow battery alarm was the same as your kid is dying alarm. After I got the alarm handled and was checking the baby, my father from the bedroom doorway asked if everything was okay. I said yes, it was all good, and he shut the door and left. I thought it was weird that he was standing outside the doorway looking at the ceiling. I was looking at the ceiling. It wasn't until later when I was finally going back to sleep, and I mostly slept nude. Months later, another event happened. By this time, the baby no longer has a monitor and hasn't stopped breathing for months. She's healthy enough to co-sleep, and I was rocking that bedtime nursing well in the middle of the night. I woke up because there's something biting my nipple. Turns out the baby woke up and decided to help herself to a midnight snack. Except she didn't get a good latch. She got frustrated and freaking bit me. I tell her that story every chance I get. Why can't I have an ABC? Well, when you were about 4 months old. Why can't I go to XYZ? Well, one time when you were very little.